Welcome back. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Emily at 7:35.
It is, and it's time for Headline Makers. Joining us to go through the day's headlines is Deputy Editor of Spike, Fraser Myers, and writer and commentator Candice Holsworth.
Good to see you both this morning. We kicked off last time looking at this demo, this sort of anti-Brexit demo and dance. And as you were saying, we sent Ben Leo down to have a look, and this is what he came back with.
What do you think of Brexiteers?
Idiots. Deluded.
What else do you miss about the EU? Are you saying that Europe needs a bath?
No, with Bath for Europe.
Oh.
No. Oh, no, I like the EU and I love living here, but I also love living in Spain.
You can't just say 60% of Brits want to rejoin. Where's that from?
No newspaper.
Who, The Guardian?
Everything in the EU is elected.
No one in this country
they are.
voted for Guy
They are.
Verhofstadt. What do you miss about the EU?
I miss the economic prosperity that we had. The other countries seem to have recovered a lot better from it than we have.
Germany's in a recession, though, and we're not. So how's that true?
I'm not an economist.
Well, there you go.
We can tell where Ben stands.
Yes. His view's pretty clear. But I tell you what, it sort of highlights to me, Candice, it's not to rubbish anyone's views, because the country was always was and always will be 50-50 on this, pretty much. It's the idea that people... They always say Brexiteers didn't know what they voted for. Well, the Remainers don't all seem to know what they're fighting for.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And I think, in my experience, and I'm not saying this in a partisan way, it really is based on my observations, many people I know who voted for Brexit had really looked into it because it was considered, before the actual referendum result, to be the alternative position. Maybe most people thought that Remain was going to win. So they often had looked into it in depth and were quite informed about it. So it's an absolute fallacy that Brexiteers were completely uninformed. And there were many people in the debates that I had about it on the Remain side who didn't know certain things. Of course, you could say that for the Brexit side as well, but I did feel like the Brexit side was positioned as very uniquely uninformed.
Yeah.
And the Remain side was, you know, all the scientists and the experts.
Right, it was the great unwashed, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a lot of the hardcore Remainers are really... They're talking about a vibe rather than, you know, they sort of feel good about the EU. It's nice, it's over there, it's like a sort of utopian thing. And then you talk to these people and you're like, do you actually know what's going on in Europe? Because it's actually not that attractive. As Ben Leo reminded people, you know, Germany is in a very deep recession. For a long time, the EU or Europe has been the slowest growing continent on Earth. It wasn't actually all that great, and that's why many people decided to leave.
But of course, Brexit has caused. I mean, one guy was saying he's got a place in Spain or whatever. You know, and for the expats and all that sort of thing, all those people who want to move between countries, things have become more difficult. It's more difficult even to send a. I've got family in Spain. Sending a birthday present over is a nigh impossibility now.
Yeah, certainly. You know, there's no question that Brexit has caused disruption to certain areas, but I think it hasn't been the sort of we haven't taken the economic hit that many people predicted. I mean, if you remember, look back at the Remain campaign in 2016. They said that we would all be £4,000 worse off as a result of Brexit. So, you know, sort of that came from the UK Treasury. That wasn't just a bunch of campaigners. Those were the official expert. That was the expert view, and that, you know, is proven wrong. If you look at, you know, those people clearly haven't seen the revised GDP figures, for instance, that we were talking about earlier. I generally think that it is based on, you know, good people, wise people voted Remain, bad people voted for Brexit, and therefore I'm upset about Brexit because, you know, where does it fit into the culture war? Rather than, you know, an honest look at what has actually happened since.
Yeah, also it's, you know, a lot of Brexiteers were called far-right or, you know, racists or whatever. There's a bit of an irony to the fact that it's actually on the continent that countries are moving to the right when it comes to electing their governments.
And you know, the EU, in terms of its attitude towards external migration, I mean, some people call it Fortress Europe. I mean, it makes Suella Braverman look like Mother Teresa, really, because, you know, the amount of... It's very distressing, you know, when scores of people drown in the English Channel. You know, in the Mediterranean, you're talking tens of thousands of people every year. People are, you know...
Go on, Candice.
I think as well, for me, I also want to... I don't want to caricature Remainers too much, because I know people had very genuine reasons for voting Remain. And very rational reasons, and I do sometimes deplore the polarised nature of the debate, where we weren't able to empathise with each other. And I hope at some point that we can get to that.
Yeah, well, that is what we need to do, actually, because it can't be them and us the whole time.
We can all hold hands and sing Kumbaya.
Well, yes, you can laugh all you like, but it's what we need to be doing. Can we just have a quick look at this in the Mail on Sunday, Candice? Because obviously all the allegations surrounding Russell Brand, and they are just allegations at the moment, is bringing a lot to the surface, isn't it? Including Georgina Bailey, the whole Andrew Sachs affair and all that. So all this is coming back to the surface.
Yes, I find this so fascinating. And Georgina Bailey, she's actually been a very interesting voice in this whole debate. So, I mean, she was at the centre of that whole Sachs gate. I think it was in 2008, where Russell Brand and Jonathan Ross prank called her grandfather, making extremely lewd comments about Russell Brand's relationship with her. There was a huge reaction to it. I think they were suspended. The BBC controller, Leslie Douglas, lost her job. But I think what was lost was that she was sort of just dismissed. It became a lot about Andrew Sachs and what they'd done to him. But as she said at the time, no one really apologised to me. I was humiliated, and it caused a terrible rift between her and her grandfather. He didn't speak to her again for many, many, many years.
Really?
I think he's a very old-fashioned, conservative man, and I think he found it humiliating, and it did cause a divide between them, and I think that's what really affected her. What I find so interesting, though, is that she's actually said that Russell Brand did make amends with her, and that he paid for her rehab when she was struggling with addiction. He apologised to her, so she doesn't feel anger towards him anymore. And I think it's good that we have all these different voices in the debate. I'm not taking a side, but I just think, you know, someone who had a very negative dealing with him, she's actually coming out and saying, well, I actually don't feel that personal animosity towards him.
But she can't forgive Jonathan Ross.
No, because she said he never apologised to her. He never made any amends. He apologised to her grandfather and wrote him a letter, but she was just ignored. And there are a lot of people who did dismiss her and sort of said, well, she deserved it. But we're different now. We take a different attitude now, I think.
We're going to hear from so many different people, aren't we? About Russell Brand, and he was a good guy, he was an awful guy. I do find I'm quite uncomfortable with it in a way, because it is trial by me. If this was a criminal case ongoing, then fine, it's evidence being given and that's fine. But we're not at that stage.
Yeah, and there is a sort of broader sort of trashing of his character, I guess, by tying it to... You know, it was a shocking scandal at the time, but it was seen as a scandal. It wasn't illegal. No. It was, you know, sort of the humour of the age. I think there is something... One thing I've found strange is the way that period of time has now become the bad old days. Yeah. Like, the bad old days used to be the 1970s, where we're talking about the Jimmy Savile scandal. Now we talk about the nasty noughties, as if everything that happened in that time was lewd and, you know, vicious, and Russell Brand was just typical, you know, of that era. I think that's, you know, pretty inaccurate.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I am no fan of Russell Brand as a performer, comedian, actor, anything. I mean, it's not...
Everyone seems to be saying that, but there must be some people out there who really enjoyed his humour.
There must be, but it's, you know, never was my cup of tea at all. And yet, you know, you've got to follow the justice system in this country, and that's what we're not doing.
And it can't just be based on your personal assessment. No. Very unpleasant people are also entitled to things like the presumption of innocence. And I was going to say, there was a piece in Spiked magazine, an interview with Harvey Proctor, who was at the centre of the whole Operation Midland investigation, and he's really held the line on presumption of innocence, even with the Hugh Edwards story as well. And he has said, you know, these people, we shouldn't just immediately rush to judgment. No. And he is someone who knows what it's like to have the whole society turn against you, and how hard that is.
Well, look, I'll tell you what, this is all very heavy stuff, so we want to lighten things up a little bit. Because